Hello, we are here, Spiritual Awakening Circle. It's Monday Spiritual Awakening series. And just as a word of introduction, we are supporting individuals and businesses here at Spiritual Awakening Circle on their spiritual journey, in providing guidance. Now I believe we've got 3,200 members in our Facebook group. So we are very happy to have such a strong group of supporters. And we offer memberships, we offer online courses, we offer online summits. And eventually, when we can meet, we will offer retreats in our spiritual village in Italy, central Italy, as well as meetups in various cities of the world, where we hope to see some of you, if not all of you. But the most exciting part of today's meeting is I have Karen Kaplan with me, who's going to tell us about her personal spiritual journey and a very hard lesson of forgiving. And I will allow Karen to introduce herself in her own words, and then we'll chat about her journey. Hi, Karen.
Hi, thank you for having me on the Spiritual Awakening Circle. I'm very excited today to share my story about learning to forgive. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I grew up here in Chicago. I live now in a suburb. I'm married. My oldest son is with his wife. They're expecting in April. I'll be a grandmother for the first time. I'm excited. I have my middle son. My middle son lives in Michigan. I have a daughter who's now living in Nebraska. So my kids are kind of all over the place here in the United States. But it's so nice to be on this website. I'm meeting people from all over the world, and I'm hoping that one day I can go to that village in Italy. So I grew up on the north side of Chicago in an Orthodox religious neighborhood, a Jewish neighborhood, in Chicago. And I was raised going to private Jewish school, and I met and married. And during that course of my life, I had followed everything that I was taught to do. So I followed all the rules. I listened to my parents. I'm the type of person that you tell me to do something and I do it. I'm a perfectionist. And that's what I was doing all along in my life until one day I woke up and said, I'm not happy. I'm not happy with all these rules that I've been following. And I thought that life would bring me happiness or God would bring me happiness. And I just wasn't happy. And that's when I think I started to just question my life and why I'm here and all that. That was just the very, very beginning.
Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly from our chat before this live, you met someone who was quite crucial on your journey, a psychic medium.
Yes.
Who I believe helped you.
Yes, very much so. So I've been married. I was married for 17 years, but my mom had passed away in 97, and I was heartbroken. She was my rock, and my marriage seemed like it was falling apart. And I just felt all isolated and all alone. And it was at that time that I decided to see a therapist because I knew that there was more to life. In addition to my mom passing, my brother passed away in 91. So I was extremely heartbroken. My father was a Holocaust survivor, and he was very abusive in our home. Growing up, but I didn't think that had an effect on my life at that time as an adult. So I went to see a therapist who also is a medium. She channels. And she noticed something right away about me. She said, Karen, you're carrying a lot of anger and you're following in your father's footsteps. And just as your father has been held on to that anger and that bitterness for 70 years since the Holocaust, you too are doing what he is doing. And I didn't think I was carrying anger as a perfectionist. Anger is not a perfect emotion, and I've never expressed it, but I didn't realize I was stuffing it down inside of me all these years. And she says, Karen, you need to let this go. And she says, you need to heal. You need to be happy. I said, well, what do I do? She says, you need to forgive your father. And I said to her, excuse me, but you don't understand the meaning of forgiveness. You see, I was raised, as I said, in an Orthodox environment, and my teachers, who were my rabbis in that time during the 70s, taught me about forgiveness, which is that I don't have to forgive anyone unless they ask me. And when they ask, they have to ask with contrition, with intent, meaning in their heart that they truly want to forgive. I don't have to forgive them the first time. I don't have to even forgive them the second time. But on the third time, if this person approaches me and asks me for forgiveness, then I'm obligated to forgive them, or the onus will fall on me. So I said to my therapist, my father is never going to ask me for forgiveness. He doesn't think he did anything wrong, and he's going to blame it on me. He said, you deserve what had happened. Well, I grew up in an abusive household. My father was physically abusive to my mother and brothers. The two older brothers. He was verbally, emotionally, psychologically abusive to all of us, financially abusive, and also sexually abusive to my mother. So I said to my therapist, there's nothing to forgive here. And she said to me, but you're the one that's still the victim. You're living with this bitterness and hatred in your heart. In order for you to be happy, this is what you need to work on. And after a few months, I had to relearn the definition of forgiveness and change, I had a paradigm shift of what the word actually means. Once I figured that out, then I said, well, what do I do now? She says, just remember your childhood, go through your memories and just think about what happened. And as I was doing that, I started to bring up all these emotions that I had stuffed inside me. I was like a volcano purging. I was this anger, this bitterness, this resentment of how I was raised, how I lived, the hypocrisy in my household. I was just letting it all go. Mostly in the shower. I did a lot of crying in the shower because I didn't want my children to hear me. But it was almost 2 years of releasing this emotional negativity that was deep down inside of me. And finally,
yes.
Yeah. And
so
then
it was. Sorry, I was just jumping in, just wondering whether you would call that moment your spiritual awakening. I mean, you had to confront your religious beliefs. You had to change your mindset, your way of understanding spirituality.
Yeah.
How difficult was that? I mean, on top of the healing, of course. But
well, I was confronting several things. There was also a lot of shame involved, because the shame of getting divorced, the shame of not following the rules or laws in my community. Hearing all this was very hard, and raised to believe one way and then change and learn another way. It comes with a lot of other baggage as well. But I was determined. I wanted to be happy. I didn't want to live a life just living and not showing any joy. There was no passion in I wanted to be happy. And I thought I would try this way and see if opening my heart up to compassion and love for my father, and learning to let go of these rigid rules that I grew up with. I needed to let go of all of that. If it didn't work, I would certainly be able to go back to the way I lived before, but I thought I would try a different route. And for other people who are religious and adhere to laws, we all have different paths in life. That just wasn't working for me anymore, and I needed to do something. And finally, my dad was in the hospital in the ICU for 7 days, and every day I'd come and visit him. But on the 7th day, I walked in when the doctor had said, I can't believe this man is still alive. And I said to the doctor, excuse me, don't speak that way in front of my father. He is a Holocaust survivor. And he said, well, no wonder why he's still clinging to life. It made sense to him. He left the room, the nurse left the room, and all of a sudden my heart opened up to compassion for him. And I've never felt that for my father. And for me, that was the next step in forgiveness. And then I walked over to his bedside and held his hand. He was lifeless, just laying there, and held his hand and said to him, Daddy, I forgive you. I honestly forgive you. I told him, you don't have to struggle anymore. And you've struggled all your life. You don't have to struggle now in death. He looked like he was in pain. And I told him he needs to go back. Your family from Poland is they're all waiting for you. It's time to let go. And I uttered the words, I forgive you. And within a few minutes, he just opened his eyes. And I was completely startled. And I was wondering, what was he thinking? Well, he opened his eyes after 7 days of being in a coma. Nothing what he thought. And but he died a couple of days later, and I know with certainty that I had forgiven my father with a loving and compassionate heart, and I buried him, and I finally felt free.
That's beautiful that you've managed to actually communicate before he left our planet, before he was gone.
Yes.
Oh, so you had a moment of completion in terms of the ancestral history as well, because it sounds like you close a cycle, a family cycle of that anger and
yes. In my book, which I forgot to mention that I'm an author.
Yes, I've introduced you, so yes.
Okay. So
my
book is called, I'm not sure if I'm holding this right. Okay. My book is called Descendants of Rygród. Rygród is a town in northeastern Poland, subtitled Learning to Forgive. And in my book, I share stories about my family. I also share the history and the lineage of my family and how we as Jews had migrated all across from Europe during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. We were forced out of the country, expelled, and my family eventually migrated and settled in Poland, which had welcomed the Jews. And so from generation to generation, there was a lot of suffering, pogroms, blood libels all throughout Europe against the Jews. And generation to generation, there's this lineage of suffering that just like a gene passes on from generation. There's this energetic lineage that also passes on, and it molds the next generation. And I felt like being a child of a Holocaust survivor was kind of like the ultimate. And I carried this huge burden of suffrage inside of me. And I thought, well, maybe I should go back to Poland to see if maybe I can forgive those that killed my father's family, or my family, my grandmother, my aunts, uncles, cousins. And I share the story in my memoir of what happened in Poland.
Oh, beautiful. Well, as you know, I come from Poland, and I've heard all the stories of after the Second World War. Obviously, my family was affected by the war. It was unavoidable. So there's a lot of heritage to carry in terms of that energy. And how did you find out about it? Did it come to you somehow organically, instinctively, or did you actually do channeling sessions with your medium? How that whole journey happened?
So my therapist, who's also a channeler, she was the one who had helped me through this journey of forgiveness. And I went back to Poland and also came home, finished writing my memoir, and he had a horrific experience of a home invasion. And my father's Holocaust began with a home invasion. And I came home back to Deerfield, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. I had 3 masked men with guns and masks and zip ties coming to my home, and we were held hostage But my daughter actually intuitively knew what to do. She had a premonition 6 months before, and she had dialed for emergency. Within seconds, that third home invader barged open the door in her room when she had a gun to her head, and he grabbed the phone, and he saw that she had dialed for emergency. So they all bolted out of the home. But the synchronicity of this is that my father's Holocaust began with a home invasion. 70 years later, I am part of a home invasion with my children. And I wondered if I could forgive those men, because to me, the ultimate challenge of forgiveness is forgiving someone who wants to hurt your own children. And that was an experience, I guess, I had to go through, of which I did. And I also, again, worked with my therapist, and we worked through all that. Since finishing my book, I had, I've been speaking in Germany, Poland, all throughout Chicago, New York, all over. And a gentleman once in the audience had asked me, well, you talked about in your book, you share the lineage of your family, the history, but what about this man named Ari Kaplan, who you're named after? So my father originally was named Avram Steinsapir. Then he changed his name. He held on to this alias, Ari Kaplan, throughout the war and for the rest of his life. Therefore, I'm Karen Kaplan. I've kept my maiden name. So I wondered, who is this man whose name I inherit?
Right. It's not a Jewish name, is it?
Kaplan can be Jewish. It's also German. There's many Germans, and it's a European name. Some Hungarians and are named Kaplan as well. So it's in some Czechs and too. So I looked all over in ancestry information, Jewish ancestry, United States Holocaust Museum archives, and I couldn't find any information. So I said to my therapist, who's also a channel, I said, you know what? I don't know what to do. It's been 6 months. I can't find out any information. And she said, well, why don't we just conjure up the spirit of this man? And I said to her, you can do that? I've never met him before. She says, well, yeah, we'll see if it works. And we set a time. This man named Aryeh Kaplan came through, and he started to tell me about his life in Poland. And he told me that he was from Rygród, and I thought the same town as my father. And I said, then you must have known my father. Maybe you two knew each other before the war, and that's how he got your ID. Maybe you were friends. And he said no. And he explained to me that he had died in the forest, and my father came upon his body. But I was questioning whether this is the right man, the spirit, because if he was from Rygród, my father should have known him. All Jews kind of knew each other in these small little villages.
Yes.
And so we ended the session, and I spent 3 weeks on the computer trying to figure this out. And he said there was a train station in Rygród, and I explained there is no train station. I've been to Poland twice. I've been there. There's a bus station right next to my father's home. I said there's a church. He goes, there is no church. And so I was so confused that after 3 weeks, I finally typed in the word Rygród train station. And what I realized was there are 2 Rygróds in Poland. This spirit came from a Rygród in northwestern Poland, and my father grew up in northeastern Poland, a different Rygród. I thought, how did my dad get his ID? So I went back and had another session with him, and he explained that he went AWOL in the German army, and he died in the forest. After my father witnessed after that home invasion in Poland in June 22nd, 1941, when the Nazis entered Rygród, my father witnessed his mother and sisters butchered to death by the Nazis. He ran into the forest, and he lived 3.5 years in the forest. During those years, he came upon this dead soldier in the forest, and he turned him over. He found an ID that said Ari Kaplan, and it was a soldier who was a foot soldier, the lowest level soldier, because this man was a Mischling, part Jewish, part German, and he was also a Pole because he was living in Poland.
Yes.
And my father took on his name, because he's told me it saved his life. And that was the only thing we talked about, was that it saved his life. And he didn't want to discuss this with me anymore. So the spirit said, I was still hovering around my body. I was so angry at Hitler. I was so angry at Germany that I couldn't move into the light. I was angry at God. And so my soul just stayed and hovered over my body. And when your father came upon me and turned me over and took my ID and took my clothes and put on my boots and all that, I decided I was going to merge my energy or my soul into your father's body. And I said to him, "You're a Dybbuk?" Because the Dybbuk is a Yiddish term for an entity invasion. And he says, "Call me what you like." But I stayed with your father until the day he died. And that's when I was in complete shock, because I never knew that things like this existed. So then I went on to have about 8 more sessions with the spirit, and he seemed to know how to answer every single question as if he was like a fly on the wall in my house. He grew up with us, and he said, and we ended up having this relationship with this friendship I ended up having a friendship with the spirit. He was helping me understand my father, his nature, my household, how my father thought, what he went through. I have more information about him going through the war and in the DP camps and how he got to Chicago. But he also wanted to ask me for forgiveness, because when he entered my father, not only did my father carry this lineage of anger and the anger of what suffering, but the spirit also carried a lot of anger, and his anger, coupled with my father's anger, turned my father into this maniacal, mercurial man, kind of like bipolar. One moment he's neutral, and the next moment he's abusive. So the spirit said to me that part of his anger is what drove my father to his abusive ways. And I forgave him, but it's just an incredible story.
It is an incredible story, and what is incredible is how much you traveled on your spiritual journey while you were healing and forgiving your father. I mean, there are some incredible experiences you've had in terms of your spiritual awakening and your spiritual experiences. That's remarkable. And I know you wanted to share your story with the world. So that's why you wrote a book. I think you are writing another book.
Yeah. So I wrote this book, but then the next book is called Conjoined. And it's also a story of healing. And it's a story of learning about my father and his entity invasion and how I connected with this spirit of Ari Kaplan. And it's really it's a story of healing and how you can heal from different dimensions. You can send prayers and love and connect, that there's no barrier to any of this, that love and kindness and goodness can reach all dimensions. And that's what I've learned.
That's amazing, because that's what we believe in here as well. And do you actually practice any spiritual modalities now when your healing process has finished?
I do listen to a lot of tapes, read books, and my husband's on my case. I should meditate a lot more than I do.
That's such an important one.
Yes. I'm always, I have many friends who think similarly the way I do. We have wonderful conversations and chats. There's Zoom sessions on so much. There's so much to learn about. And I'm still very much connected to my tribe. And I love being Jewish. but I'm not following the rules. I let go of that religious dogma, but yet I very much love being part of my Jewish community.
Which is fine. I think we can all embrace our spirituality and religion, and make something which is working for an individual needs, as you said. And for some people, even being an orthodox religious person is working, but for some who need different access to a different dimension that might not be quite enough. And that's what I think we are discussing here. It wasn't enough for you. You needed to access more and embrace that spiritual journey fully. I wonder, because forgiveness is never an easy lesson. I think we all had to, or wanted to, or tried to forgive someone. And from personal experience, I know there are one of the most difficult lessons. What were your biggest takeouts? And if you wanted to sort of share with our viewers, what was the most helpful, or what were the observations you've made which helped you really?
Well, by truly understanding what the word means, because we're all conflicted about, we all have different definitions of what this word means. But what I learned was that forgiveness is more about the victim, more about the person that's been hurt, and helping the victim versus then helping the perpetrator, or the one who did all the who was at fault. It's about, how do you grow? We've all had. I wrote my book because many of us have lived through experiences in our childhood, even as adults, that we felt abandoned, and we were traumatized, abused. We felt neglected and loved by our family, by our friends, coworkers, and in all situations. And if we continue to live in those traumatic experiences, or live in that negativity, it's not helping us move forward. We need to release all that so that we can move on and heal, because I deserve to be happy. You deserve to be happy. And we all deserve to be happy and to live a life of joy and happiness. I think that's why that's why we're all here, is to live free and happy and with love and peace. And so by forgiving those who have hurt you, you're actually healing yourself, regardless of what the person had done. They may have moved on. They may have never even thought they've done anything wrong. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant what they've done. It's all about how you can move forward. And that's how I look at what forgiveness is.
Absolutely. That's a way to empower yourself and obviously have much happier life. I love that message. Absolutely. And you are sharing that message widely and loudly, which is great. And thank you. Let me just ask finally about the movie. I think you might be even writing a script for a movie. So that's quite exciting.
Right. So based on this book, Descendants of Rygrid, I had hired a couple of LA screenwriters, and they wrote a script, which I then submitted to different film festivals. And I want to give a shout out to the LA Live Film Festival for selecting my script based on my book as the top award, winning the Hemingway Award. And they loved the script. And I'm hoping that I'll get enough people interested in this so that I'll be able to one day make a movie from this. But then with the second book that I'm working on conjoined, I think that will add to the script and make the script even richer, talking about this paranormal experience that happened to me, and bring this as well into the script. So that's what I'd like to do.
Amazing. And I think we are all agreeing here that spirituality as a tool is such an amazing tool in healing, in leading a happy life, and also being a better person generally. sharing that love and light with others and making the world a slightly better place. So I keep my fingers and toes crossed, and I would love to hear when and if there is progress with the movie. We'll definitely share it. And I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to our conversation. Is the final comments?
Just during this time of COVID, it's been hard for people, and we're going through a very difficult time in our world here in America. And there's a lot of riffraff and a lot of spewing of hatred, and it's just a difficult time. And now more than ever, it's really important to learn to forgive, have compassion for people, and
And share the love.
yeah, and share the love. Yes.
Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your story, for being such a gracious guest. And thank you to Julie and Sherry, who made some comments and watched with us. So we would love to have you back when the movie is out, talk some more. And in the meantime, thank you so much. And I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon, wonderful evening or morning, wherever you are. And this will be available on replay as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Bye.